Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's live stream. Let's go over the major pivots, shall we? Longest overexpanded period is currently roughly 140. Let's get ACAT loaded up, and I will also load that manually because I'm very curious as to how this swing high might be playing out. To my understanding, should be a bearish. Well, shoot. We wicked inside, but I don't know if that's technically considered active. Questionable. Definitely questionable. Right? It's actually 140, but ACAT should give us the exact reading, so shoot. Come back. There we go. Yep, that looks accurate. Let's zoom in on this price action. So, what do we see? See the compression range forming from previous trend, which held price for a very long time. We tagged this lower 3.2 standard deviation before trend reversal. With a significant mean reversion, activation, and condition and completion. Wow, what an interesting place for that to wick up to. Right, we have this mean reversion condition here. The swing high is implied to be 10,540. We wicked up exactly to that value before trending up the 3.2 standard deviation of the new upward expansion, which generated here. And now we have this trend definition on the 4-hour, which is the 1.25 standard deviation of roughly the 145 period. So what do we get next? Well, we have a compression range forming on top of the longest overexpanded period with the 1.25 standard deviation pivot holding quite nicely. For the moment, this is implied bullish. Okay. We have higher potential energy on the lower time frames, which we will go over now. Right, because this kind of tight compression range does lend well to trend, right? This here maxed out at around 300. Let's just wait for ACAT to load up and we'll see what that looks like. Beautiful. As you can see, this is an active mean reversion condition. However, very close to being over because of volatility overhead has just about reached that lock. It is 1, 2, 3, 4 periods away from being able to viably trend. So really, Bitcoin is going to be, I'm assuming, just tagging along the swing high here. I believe we're going to stay in this compression range here on the 1-hour chart pretty nicely. So we'll kind of just get this compression here. And if Bitcoin were to break down, that would be bearish. That would further deepen this mean reversion condition. However, a deepening of the mean reversion condition on the 1-hour would be an activation of the mean reversion condition on the 4-hour. So if we actually broke this support here, that would be bearish for Bitcoin, and we would enter another cycle of compression and possibly downward trend. If on the 1-hour chart we do manage to stay in this compression range, and the mean reversion condition evaporates by the volatility overhead working its way up to the lock period, that would mean we could viably trend upward off of this 1.25 standard deviation on the 4-hour chart, because volatility overhead here on the 4-hour chart is evaporated, and upward moves from that area would end up being quite bullish for Bitcoin. So let's keep your fingers crossed at the moment. If we stay above this pivot roughly around 9,130, looks like we have had a few wicks to the downside inside that mean reversion condition, so do be careful with your stop losses. We should probably talk about what bullish confirmation on lower time frames would look like. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 30-minute chart, because there's still a lot of volatility overhead there on the 1-hour. Yeah, looks pretty choppy to me. 1 hour is going to have to do. Yeah, so because this is all orange above here and then this is all green down here, we can viably trend on shorter periods, which are just these small, tiny upward and downward expansions like so, because trend is constrained to the available potential energy on the lower time frames and periods. So think about this. We are getting miniature trends in the perspective of the potential energy available to them by their relative periods. Whereas these longer periods will not provide trend because the potential energy available to those longer periods and to the relativity of those longer periods is very low. So that means we can get periods defined by shorter terms, whereas we cannot get trend defined by longer terms. And as you can see, the ratio of available potential energy of short periods to long periods is slowly churning out to the favor of longer periods. And that's how compression works, right? As we move toward a state of potential energy in higher periods, the result is typically trend as defined by longer periods, which means longer trends and a larger percentile deviation of trends, right? So let's put that into perspective. Let's put on a little lesson here. All right, so all the way over here, we could only viably trend as defined by, say, the 40 period, right? So if we load up a 40 period band, and let's have this mirror it. So 40 over here as well. All right, so here, or our longest, or our lowest compressed period is 40, right? What happens? We can only see trends as viable by that 40 period, right? So what happens when it increases all the way up to 70? Well, I'll tell you what, let's load up the 70 period. Oh, look at, now we can only see viable trend as defined by the 70 period. Oh, look at that. And what happens when we roll up to all the way over here, the 140 period? Do you see what's happening? So now over here, for this period's 140, we can only see trend as defined by the 140 period, which means we could viably see moves anywhere in here. And then now that it's all the way up to 160, now we can only see trend as viable by, you guessed it, the 160 period. And that's what the green band on ACAT essentially does. Pretty cool, right? You can calculate available potential energy for an array of periods and then define which periods could viably see trend and the potential distance of those trends. I don't think there's any other indicator that can do it as reliably as ACAT is doing it here. Pretty cool, right? And then we can even go deeper and then change our CLCP value, wave PM threshold value for compression. Currently it's set to 0.4. If we actually crank that up to 0.7, it should give us some more interesting results. I don't like how our indicators don't show you if they're loading anymore, so we're just gonna have to wait until the bands change. But because this area of compression is so clean, we should be considering this value as our compression up here by changing it to 0.7. 0.4 is a very high level of compression, but because it's typically so close to the 0.7, yeah. So by setting it to 0.4, we're essentially saying, hey, if we went up above this, it would be expanding, whereas setting it to 0.7 is essentially saying, hey, this is the highest value we could potentially go without trending, right? So 0.7 for the CLCP is used for defining if trend is viable at all right? So if we go outside this value, that would mean we are verifiably trending and causing re-expansion of volatility overhead, which essentially means there is enough force applied to re-expand previously overexpanded periods. Whereas setting it to 0.4 is going to say, hey, if we travel outside this band, that would be the absolute earliest beginnings of trend. So if you believe you're entering a true compression area period, 0.4 is going to serve you better because it's far more likely you're just going to see miniature expansions as defined by the smallest value possible without causing expansion at all, right? Without causing any kind of trend. Whereas setting it between above 0.7 means, hey, trend is happening if we go outside this. So 0.7 is good for catching absolute swing highs and swing lows, whereas 0.4, and it's going to require a bit more adjustment since, see how this green value up here is registering? So that's pretty much just using our 600 period as our longest CLCP. And that's giving us an incorrect reading because we're measuring it off of this instead of this down here. So you need to know your 3D wave PM as well to use it effectively at 0.7. Because when you use it at 0.4, you'll correctly identify these here. And essentially, when you're getting these miniature expansions like this, the values are essentially going to be the same. But as soon as you start getting longer scores of volatility overhead, like this compared to this, then you want to have that period differentiation to determine trend viability and pivots. Since like over here, this is great. Since this initial expansion, we're reading the exact volatility overhead with the exact potential swing highs and swing lows. So you'll notice that this downward slope here pretty reliably catches the absolute lowest Bitcoin will be able to go without resuming downward trend. And let's back up over here a bit, because why not? So this is really interesting. This compression range held for a really long time. And you'll notice what happens when we actually go outside this 1.25 standard deviation. It results in trend, albeit very short trend that immediately returned to a state of compression. But this downward move here would have identified that you needed to stop out, which then resulted in a 6% downward move. And then as soon as we re-entered our compression range, well, we had a small upward trend, but it was defined by our compression area periods. And that allowed for mean reversion to once again occur, and then even longer term compression as we define it by the compression that was laid out by the previous expansion. So you got to know your readings on 3D Wave PM. See, like this here, because we're getting choppy volatility overhead, none of that's going to be usable without micromanaging time frames, so we're not going to talk about that. Like, we would have to go to a higher time frame to actually. Why not? Let's do it. Go to the 4 hour. Because we want to check out this structure here. Now this compression is resulting from previous longer term trend. We have to go to the daily, it looks like. It should be possible. Ooh, 12 hour. Oh, I got my hotkeys all mixed up. It's pretty choppy, but it's still pretty astounding how well we managed to catch those swing lows. I would not trade off of something this choppy, however. I would stick to the lower time frames for compression and expansion. As far as the daily chart goes here, though, there is still very usable information based on the actual longest overexpanded period and wave PM readings. So allow me to introduce you. And we're just going to turn off our CLCP here because it's a bit cluttery. I would like to turn off show longest compressed period. Should take a second to update. Just give it a moment. Very nice. All right, so this is a nice example where our locksmith defines trend, which is this purple band here. As long as we're outside this, trend is defined. Right? Tag, tag, tag. Those are all trend continuation signs, so those are all long opportunities. But then we break into the band here on this candle. So when we break into the band here, that means trend is over. And our implied target for mean reversion is its relative longest over expanded period. Lo and behold, as soon as we activate the mean reversion condition, price trends down to the mean. Very nice. And as soon as that condition is over, well, what happens? Well, whatever Bitcoin wants, really. In this case, well, whatever this is. I guess we'll find out soon enough what they actually have planned, eh? All right, I did have a request to look at BAT. Go ahead and check that out. Okay. I can see the appeal. Upward trend implied broken parabola. Quad CCI is muddy as hell. No defined longest over expanded period based on this volatility overhead. Converse expansion based on this initial upward move and then downward move. And volatility overhead reading from this red period here. So 4 hours not going to do much for us. We get the 12. 12 looks okay. Looking to be pretty difficult to find that little area of trend. No volatility overhead on the daily. So at least down here, we can see the cyclical expansion and compression. I think it's most readily visible on just regular wave PM. Oh, you can see the net periods rising, compressing, rising, compressing, rising, compressing, rising, compressing. So, but because these readings are so muddy, actually there was one clear signal. Actually two, hold on. This looks really bad, but if we zoom in and actually take a moment to analyze these readings. So this here was one signal. I think it's Alt-V. There we go. That was one signal because everything's below 4.4 and there's comprehensive net expansion to the upside. Next signal would have been here. Alt-V. And last one would have been here. So all we need to do is check out the CCI readings in this location. So this one's positively weighted, it resulted in positive trend, right? Positive weighted CCI, upward cross, trend, good. Positively weighted CCI, well, this one, positively weighted CCI here. We have PM cross to the upside. You would have entered along here in this implication. Quad CCI would have had you take it here. I would have initially entered on this candle and then doubled down there. And then if we went below this 50 band, is that 50? No, I actually manually, oh, that's ACAT, huh, funny. Oh yeah, because we're still writing this previous LOXP, which compressionary period did plan out. I only got 1 minute left, goddamn. I have caffeinated today. And then the last one is here. That one's actually bearish. That gave us the wrong signal. That implied down. Huh, fun. So you would have stopped out of that because that would have gone up. And now, yeah, I got nothing for BAT. I'm sorry. Not confident on the quad CCI reading because the trend line's broken. Compressionary period with converse expansion. Well, ACAT should read this. I got 30 seconds. Let's do this. Come on, ACAT. Oh, guess we're out of time, eh? see what we got. Come on, cat. Well, at least I actually, there we go. Yeah, implied mean aversion down to 2,300, implied lowest, 1825. That's it. Nice. Any new YouTube comments? Nope, that's it. All right, guys, I'll talk to y'all later. I got work to do. You have a beautiful day. Ciao.